The old lighthouse stood alone on the rocky cliff. Its white paint was peeling away after years of wind and salt water. The lighthouse had been there for more than 100 years. It watched over the dark ocean below. Many ships had found their way home because of its bright light. But now the light was off. Nobody lived there anymore. Sarah drove her small blue car up the narrow road. The road twisted and turned as it climbed the cliff. She held the steering wheel tight. The wind pushed against her car. She could hear the ocean waves crashing on the rocks far below. Sarah had never been to this place before. She looked at the paper in her hand. The address was correct. This was the lighthouse her grandmother had left her. Her grandmother had died 3 months ago. Sarah missed her very much. They had been close when Sarah was a little girl. But then Sarah grew up and moved to the city. She got busy with work and friends. She did not visit her grandmother as much as she should have. Now it was too late. Her grandmother was gone. The lawyer had called Sarah last week. He told her about the lighthouse. Sarah was surprised. She did not know her grandmother owned a lighthouse. Her grandmother had never talked about it. The lawyer said Sarah needed to come and see the property. There were some things her grandmother wanted her to have. Sarah parked her car near the lighthouse. She got out and the wind hit her face. It was cold and smelled like salt. She pulled her jacket closer. The sky was gray with clouds. It looked like rain would come soon. Sarah walked to the big red door of the lighthouse. She pulled out the key the lawyer had given her. The key was old and heavy. It had a small tag on it. The tag had her grandmother's handwriting. It said, "Come home." Sarah did not understand what that meant. This lighthouse was not her home. She had grown up in a small house in town. She had never been to this lighthouse before. The door opened with a loud creak. Inside it was dark and cold. Sarah found a light switch on the wall. She flipped it, but nothing happened. The power was off. She used her phone as a flashlight. The light showed a round room with stone walls. There was an old table and 2 chairs. A small kitchen was in the corner. Everything was covered in dust. Sarah saw stairs going up. The stairs were made of metal and curved around the wall. She started to climb. Her footsteps made echoing sounds. Round and round she went. The stairs seemed to go on forever. Finally, she reached the top. This was the lamp room. This was where the big light had been. The lamp room had windows all around. Sarah could see the ocean in every direction. The water was dark and rough. White foam topped the waves. In the distance, she could see a few fishing boats. They looked very small. Sarah felt like she was standing on top of the world. In the center of the room was the old lamp. It was huge and made of brass and glass. The brass was dull and needed polish. But Sarah could tell it had once been beautiful. Next to the lamp was a wooden chest. The chest had a lock on it. Sarah tried the same key that opened the door. It worked. Inside the chest were books, old journals with leather covers. Sarah picked up the top one. She opened it carefully. The pages were yellow and thin. The writing inside was her grandmother's. Sarah's heart beat faster. These were her grandmother's diaries. Sarah sat down on the floor. She started to read. The first entry was from 50 years ago. Her grandmother had been young then, only 25 years old. She wrote about coming to the lighthouse for the first time. She wrote about a man named Thomas. Thomas was the lighthouse keeper. Her grandmother had fallen in love with him. Sarah kept reading. Page after page told the story. Her grandmother and Thomas had met by chance. Her grandmother had been visiting the coast on vacation. She got lost and found the lighthouse. Thomas helped her find her way back. But they kept meeting after that. They fell deeply in love, but there was a problem. Her grandmother was already engaged to another man. A man her parents had chosen for her. A rich man from the city. Her grandmother did not love him. But her parents said she had to marry him. That was how things were done back then. Girls did not always get to choose. Her grandmother wrote about the pain she felt. She loved Thomas, but she could not have him. Her wedding day was coming. She had to make a choice. The diary entries became sadder and sadder. Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she read. Then Sarah found the entry from the wedding day. But her grandmother did not marry the rich man. She had run away. She came to the lighthouse. She chose Thomas. She chose love over money and family approval. Her parents were very angry. They stopped talking to her. But her grandmother said she did not care. She was happy with Thomas. Sarah looked up from the diary. The sun was setting now. Orange and pink colors filled the sky. The ocean looked beautiful. Sarah thought about her grandmother as a young woman. She had been brave. She had followed her heart. Sarah had never known this story. Her grandmother had never told her. Sarah wondered about Thomas. She had never met him. Her grandmother had always been alone when Sarah knew her. What had happened to Thomas? Sarah picked up another diary. She needed to know the rest of the story, but it was getting dark. She could barely see the pages. Sarah decided to come back tomorrow. She would bring a lantern and food. She would read all the diaries. She wanted to know everything about her grandmother's secret life in this lighthouse. Sarah climbed down the stairs. She locked the red door behind her. She walked to her car. The wind was stronger now. The first drops of rain began to fall. Sarah looked back at the lighthouse one more time. It did not look so lonely anymore. It looked like it was full of stories, full of secrets, full of love. Sarah smiled. She would come back tomorrow. She would learn about the grandmother she thought she knew. And maybe she would learn something about herself, too. Sarah came back to the lighthouse the next morning. The storm from last night had passed. The sun was shining bright. The ocean looked calm and blue. She carried a bag with sandwiches and water. She also brought 2 lanterns and batteries. Today she would read more of the diaries. The red door opened easier this time. Sarah climbed the metal stairs again. She was not as tired today. She knew what to expect. When she reached the lamp room, she set up her lanterns. She opened the windows to let in fresh air. The room felt better with light and air moving through it. Sarah sat down with the second diary. This one started 5 years after the first one ended. Her grandmother and Thomas had gotten married. They lived in the lighthouse together. Thomas worked as the keeper. Her grandmother helped him. She cooked meals and kept the lighthouse clean. She also helped with the lamp. Every night they lit it together. Every morning they turned it off together. Her grandmother wrote about how happy she was. She said the lighthouse felt like a castle. She and Thomas were the king and queen of their little kingdom. They did not have much money, but they had each other. That was enough. They watched the storms come and go. They saved ships from crashing on the rocks. They felt proud of their work. Sarah read about the sailors who came to thank them. Men whose lives had been saved by the lighthouse beam. They brought gifts of fish and bread. Sometimes they brought letters from the mainland. Her grandmother wrote that she did not miss her old life. She did not miss the big house or fancy parties. She was happy with simple things. A good meal, a warm fire, Thomas holding her hand. Then Sarah found the entry about the baby. Her grandmother had gotten pregnant. She was scared and excited at the same time. Having a baby in a lighthouse was not easy. They were far from doctors and hospitals. But her grandmother was brave. She wrote about feeling the baby move inside her. She wrote about Thomas talking to her belly. He would tell the baby stories about the ocean and stars. The baby was born on a stormy night. The wind was howling. The rain was beating against the windows. Thomas had to deliver the baby himself. There was no time to get help. Her grandmother wrote that she had never been so scared. But Thomas was calm. He helped her through it. And then the baby cried. It was a girl. They named her Margaret. Sarah stopped reading. Margaret was her mother. Sarah had never known her mother was born in this lighthouse. Her mother had never talked about it. Her mother always said she grew up in town. Why had these stories been kept secret? Sarah felt confused but kept reading. Life with a baby in the lighthouse was hard. Margaret cried a lot. The wind and waves were too loud sometimes. Her grandmother could not always hear the baby. But they managed. Thomas built a cradle that rocked with the movement of the lighthouse. Margaret seemed to like it. She would fall asleep listening to the ocean. Years passed in the diaries. Margaret grew from a baby into a little girl. She learned to walk on the metal stairs. She learned to count by counting the stairs. 156 steps to the top. She learned colors from the sunrise and sunset. Orange, pink, purple, red. She learned about weather by watching the sky with her father. Her grandmother wrote that Margaret loved the lighthouse. She was a happy child. She played with seashells and driftwood. She made friends with the seagulls. She was not lonely even though there were no other children around. The ocean was her playground. The lighthouse was her home. But then things changed. Margaret turned 6 years old. She needed to go to school. There was no school near the lighthouse. The closest school was in town. It was too far to travel every day. Her grandmother and Thomas had to make a hard choice. They decided Margaret would live with Thomas's sister in town during the school year. She would come home to the lighthouse on weekends and summers. Her grandmother wrote about how much it hurt to send Margaret away. The lighthouse felt empty without her. Her grandmother counted the days until Margaret would visit. She wrote letters to Margaret every day. She told her about the ships that passed by. She told her about the weather. She told her how much she missed her. Margaret did well in school. She was smart and made friends. But her grandmother worried. Margaret was starting to like town life. She liked having other children to play with. She liked the stores and the library. She liked not hearing the wind all the time. Her grandmother could see Margaret was growing away from the lighthouse. Away from them. Then Thomas got sick. It happened suddenly. One day he was fine. The next day he was in bed with a high fever. Her grandmother tried everything to help him. She made him soup. She put cold cloths on his head. But nothing worked. Thomas got worse. His skin turned gray. He could not breathe well. Her grandmother called for the doctor. But the doctor could not come right away. The seas were too rough. The boat could not make it to the lighthouse. Her grandmother had to watch Thomas suffer. She held his hand. She told him she loved him. She begged him to stay with her. But Thomas kept getting worse. Finally, the doctor came. But it was too late. Thomas had pneumonia. His lungs were filled with fluid. He needed to go to the hospital. They carried him down the stairs. They put him on the boat. Her grandmother went with him. Margaret came too. They all went to the hospital together. Thomas stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks. He fought hard to live, but his body was too weak. One cold morning he closed his eyes and did not open them again. Thomas was dead. He was only 42 years old. Her grandmother was heartbroken. The love of her life was gone. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. She had to stop reading for a moment. The story was so sad. Her grandmother had lost everything. First her family because she chose love. Then she lost her love. It was not fair. Sarah looked out the window. The ocean was still calm and blue. Birds were flying over the water. Boats moved slowly in the distance. Everything looked peaceful. But Sarah knew the ocean could be dangerous. It could be cruel. It had taken Thomas away. It had broken her grandmother's heart. Sarah picked up the diary again. She needed to know what happened next. How did her grandmother survive? What happened to the lighthouse? What happened to Margaret? There were still so many questions. Sarah turned the page and kept reading. The afternoon sun moved across the sky. The shadows in the lamp room grew longer, but Sarah did not notice. She was lost in the story of her grandmother's life. After Thomas died, her grandmother had to decide what to do. The lighthouse still needed a keeper. Ships still needed the light. But her grandmother did not know if she could stay. Everything reminded her of Thomas. The lamp room where they watched sunsets. The kitchen where they ate breakfast. The stairs they climbed together every day. The lighthouse was full of memories that hurt. The government sent a letter. They needed to know if her grandmother would stay as the keeper. If not, they would send someone else. Her grandmother did not want strangers living in their home. She decided to stay. She would keep the lighthouse running. She would do it for Thomas. She would do it for all the sailors who needed the light. Margaret was 12 years old now. She lived in town with her aunt during school, but she came home on weekends. Margaret did not want her mother to be alone. She wanted to help. She learned how to clean the lamp. She learned how to check the fuel. She learned how to write in the logbook. Mother and daughter worked together. Her grandmother wrote that the work helped with the pain. When she was busy, she did not think about Thomas as much. Her hands stayed busy polishing brass and cleaning glass. Her mind stayed focused on keeping the light burning. Every night when she lit the lamp, she felt close to Thomas again. She imagined him standing beside her. She could almost hear his voice, but it was hard work for one person. Her grandmother was tired all the time. The lighthouse needed constant care. The salt air rusted everything. The paint peeled in the wind. The stairs needed repairs. The windows needed replacing. Her grandmother did not have enough money for all the repairs. She did her best with what she had. Years went by slowly. Margaret finished school. She was 18 now. She was beautiful and smart. She had many friends in town. Boys wanted to marry her. Her grandmother knew Margaret would leave soon. She would start her own life. The lighthouse was no place for a young woman. There were no young people here. No dances or parties, just the ocean and the wind and the light. Margaret met a man named Robert. He worked at the bank in town. He wore nice suits and had clean hands. He had never been to the lighthouse. He did not like the ocean. He said it was too loud and too wild. Margaret brought him to meet her grandmother once. Her grandmother did not like him. She thought he was too proud. She thought he looked down on their simple life, but Margaret loved Robert. She wanted to marry him. Her grandmother tried to be happy for her. She helped Margaret make a wedding dress. She used an old white curtain from the lighthouse. She sewed tiny shells onto it. It was simple but beautiful. Margaret cried when she saw it. She said it was perfect. The wedding was in town at the church. Her grandmother went, but she felt out of place. She wore her best dress, but it was old and plain. The other women wore new dresses with bright colors. They whispered and stared at her. They knew she was the lighthouse keeper. They thought it was strange that a woman did that work. They thought she should have remarried after Thomas died. Her grandmother left the wedding early. She went back to the lighthouse alone. She climbed the stairs to the lamp room. She lit the lamp even though the sun had not set yet. She sat and watched the ocean. She thought about Thomas. She wondered what he would think about Margaret's wedding. She wondered if he would like Robert. She decided he probably would not. Margaret moved to town with Robert. They bought a small house near the bank. Margaret tried to visit the lighthouse every month. But Robert did not like her going. He said it was too far. He said the road was dangerous. He said her mother should move to town. He said living in a lighthouse was foolish. Margaret had babies. First a girl, then another girl, then a boy. Her grandmother went to visit them in town. She brought gifts from the ocean. Smooth stones and pretty shells. The children liked them at first. But as they grew older, they wanted store-bought toys instead. They thought the shells were boring. They thought their grandmother was strange. Sarah stopped reading again. She realized the first baby was her mother. The timeline was adding up. Her mother had been born in town. She had grown up there. She had never lived in the lighthouse. No wonder she never talked about it. She did not know it very well. It was her grandmother's life, not hers. Sarah kept reading. Her grandmother wrote less often now. The entries were shorter. Sometimes months went by between entries. Her grandmother was getting older. The work was getting harder. She was almost 60 years old. Her back hurt from climbing stairs. Her hands shook from years of hard work. But she kept going. She refused to give up the lighthouse. Then the government sent another letter. They were going to automate the lighthouse. They did not need keepers anymore. New technology could run the light without people. It was cheaper and more efficient. Her grandmother would have to leave. They gave her 6 months to find a new place to live. Her grandmother was devastated. The lighthouse was her life. It was all she had left of Thomas. Where would she go? What would she do? She was too old to start over. She had no money saved. She had spent everything on keeping the lighthouse running. Margaret offered to let her live in town. But her grandmother did not want that. She could not imagine living in a small house on a quiet street. She needed the ocean. She needed the wind. She needed the light. Her grandmother went to the government office. She asked them to sell her the lighthouse. They said no at first, but she kept asking. She went back every week. She wrote letters. She made phone calls. Finally, they agreed. They would sell it to her for a very low price. The lighthouse was old and needed repairs. Nobody else wanted it. It was hers if she could pay, but her grandmother did not have the money. She needed help. She asked Margaret. Margaret talked to Robert. Robert said no. He said it was a waste of money. He said the lighthouse would fall apart soon. He said they should save their money for their children. Margaret felt torn between her husband and her mother. She chose her husband. She said no. Her grandmother sold everything she had. Her furniture, her clothes, her books. She sold Thomas's tools. She sold his pocket watch. She sold the gold ring he had given her. She only kept her wedding band. It broke her heart to sell these things. But she did it to save the lighthouse. She gathered every penny she could find. It was not enough. She was still short by a large amount. She did not know what to do. Then a miracle happened. A sailor came to visit. His name was Captain Anderson. He was old now with white hair and a bent back, but he remembered her grandmother and Thomas. They had saved his ship 40 years ago. He had been a young man then. His ship had been caught in a terrible storm. The lighthouse beam had guided them to safety. Without it, he and his crew would have died. Captain Anderson heard that her grandmother was trying to save the lighthouse. He wanted to help. He gave her the money she needed. He said it was the least he could do. She had saved his life. Now he would help save her home. Her grandmother cried tears of joy. She thanked him over and over. She said she would never forget his kindness. The lighthouse became hers. She owned it now. Nobody could make her leave. She felt safe for the first time in years. She wrote in her diary that she would live there until she died. She would never leave. The lighthouse was where she belonged. It was where her heart was. It was where Thomas's memory lived. Sarah closed the diary. The sun was setting now. The lamp room was filled with orange light. Sarah understood now why her grandmother had left her the lighthouse. It was not just a building. It was a love story. It was a life story. It was everything her grandmother had fought for. And now it belonged to Sarah. Sarah drove to town the next day. She needed to learn more about her family. She went to visit her mother. Her mother lived in a retirement home now. She was 78 years old. Her health was not good. She did not remember things very well anymore. But Sarah hoped she could remember something about the lighthouse. Her mother was sitting in the garden when Sarah arrived. She wore a pink sweater and had a blanket on her lap. Her hair was white and thin. She looked small and fragile. Sarah kissed her cheek and sat down beside her. They talked about small things for a while. The weather, the food at the home, the other residents. Then Sarah asked about the lighthouse. Her mother's face changed. She looked confused at first. Then she looked sad. She said she had not thought about the lighthouse in many years. She asked why Sarah wanted to know. Sarah explained that grandmother had left her the lighthouse. Her mother was surprised. She did not know her mother still owned it. Her mother started to talk. The memories came slowly at first, then faster. She said she only visited the lighthouse a few times when she was young. Her father, Robert, did not like her going there. He thought it was not safe. He thought her grandmother was too old to live alone in such a place. He worried something bad would happen. Her mother said her grandmother was stubborn. She refused to leave the lighthouse. She refused to move to town. She lived there alone for 30 more years after Thomas died. She ran the light even after the government automated it. She did it because she wanted to. Because it made her feel close to Thomas. Because it gave her purpose. Her mother said she felt guilty. She had not been a good daughter. She should have visited more. She should have helped more. But life got busy. She had her own children to raise, her own house to manage, her own husband to please. The lighthouse felt far away, not just in distance, but in every way. It belonged to a different world, a world she did not understand. Sarah asked if her mother remembered her grandmother talking about Thomas. Her mother smiled. She said yes, her grandmother talked about him all the time. She never stopped loving him. Even 30 years after his death, she still set a place for him at the table. She still said goodnight to him before bed. She still wore her wedding ring. Love like that never dies, her mother said. It just changes form. Her mother told Sarah something else. After her grandmother died, nobody wanted the lighthouse. Sarah's mother tried to sell it, but nobody would buy it. It was too old. It needed too many repairs. It was too far from everything. So it just sat empty. Her mother paid someone to check on it once a year, to make sure it was still standing. That was all. Her mother said Sarah should sell it now. It was worth nothing. It would only cost money to maintain. Better to let it go. Let someone else worry about it. But Sarah shook her head. She could not sell it. Not after reading the diaries. Not after learning the story. The lighthouse meant too much. It held too much love, too much history, too much pain and joy in life. Sarah left the retirement home and drove back to the lighthouse. She thought about her grandmother as she drove. How lonely she must have been, living in that lighthouse for 30 years by herself. No Thomas, no Margaret visiting often, just the ocean and the wind and memories. It sounded sad, but Sarah wondered if maybe her grandmother had been happy. Maybe she wanted to be alone with her memories. Maybe that was her choice. When Sarah reached the lighthouse, she climbed the stairs again. She went to the lamp room. She found the last diary. This one was not very full. Only a few years of entries. These were from the last years of her grandmother's life. Sarah sat down to read. Her grandmother was 85 years old in these entries. Her handwriting was shaky now. The words were harder to read. She wrote about her body failing. Her eyes were weak. Her legs hurt. The stairs were too hard to climb. Some days she could not make it to the top. She would sit halfway up and rest, then try again later. She wrote about being afraid, not of dying. She was ready for that. She wanted to see Thomas again. She believed she would. No, she was afraid of the lighthouse. What would happen to it when she was gone? Would anyone take care of it? Would anyone understand what it meant? Or would it just fall apart and crumble into the ocean? She wrote about Sarah, her granddaughter. She had not seen Sarah in many years. Sarah was busy with her life in the city, her career, her apartment, her friends. She did not have time for an old woman in a lighthouse. Her grandmother understood. Young people needed to live their own lives. But she missed Sarah. She remembered when Sarah was little. She used to love visiting the lighthouse. She would run up and down the stairs. She would collect shells on the beach. She would laugh at the seagulls. Her grandmother wrote that she was going to leave the lighthouse to Sarah. She hoped Sarah would understand. She hoped Sarah would keep it. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to, because she felt the love in its walls, because she heard the stories in the wind, because she saw the beauty in the light. Her grandmother wrote that she had faith in Sarah. She believed Sarah would know what to do. The last entry was short. Just 3 sentences. I am ready now. Thomas is calling me home. Take care of our lighthouse, that was all. Sarah's hands shook as she read it. Her grandmother had died 2 weeks after writing that. Peacefully in her sleep. In her bed in the lighthouse. Right where she wanted to be. Sarah set down the diary. She looked around the lamp room. She could almost feel her grandmother here. Her spirit, her love, her hope. Sarah understood now what she had to do. She would restore the lighthouse. She would bring it back to life. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to, because her grandmother had trusted her, because this place deserved to shine again. Sarah spent the next few weeks making plans. She talked to contractors about repairs. She talked to electricians about power. She talked to painters about the outside. Everyone said it would cost a lot of money. Sarah did not care. She would use her savings. She would take out a loan if she needed to. This was important. This was her purpose now. She also decided to quit her job in the city. Her job at the insurance company. She had been there for 10 years. It paid well, but she did not love it. She went to work every day because she had to, because she needed money, because that was what people did. But now she had a reason to leave. She had somewhere else to be. She had something else to do. Her friends thought she was crazy. They asked why she would give up a good job, why she would move to a lonely lighthouse. What would she do there all day? How would she make money? Sarah did not have all the answers yet, but she knew this was right. She could feel it in her heart. Just like her grandmother had felt it all those years ago when she chose Thomas over her family's plans. Sarah moved into the lighthouse one cold morning in November. She brought boxes of her things, clothes, books, pictures, her laptop. She set up a small bedroom on the 2nd floor. She cleaned out the kitchen. She bought a new stove and refrigerator. She put curtains on the windows. Slowly, the lighthouse started to feel like home. At night, Sarah would climb to the lamp room. She would sit in the dark and look at the ocean. She would think about her grandmother and Thomas. She would think about Margaret and all the choices people make. She would think about love and sacrifice and what matters most in life. The ocean would roar below. The wind would whistle around her. And Sarah would feel at peace. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The repairs took 6 months. Workers came every day. They fixed the roof. They replaced broken windows. They painted the outside white again. They repaired the metal stairs. They restored the big brass lamp. Sarah watched them work. She learned how everything worked. She wanted to take care of the lighthouse herself when they were done. The hardest part was the lamp. It had not worked in 40 years. The wiring was old and dangerous. The motor was rusted. The glass panels were cracked. The contractor said it might be impossible to fix. But Sarah insisted they try. She found an old engineer who had worked on lighthouses. His name was Mr. Chen. He was retired, but he agreed to help. He said lighthouses were his passion. Mr. Chen worked on the lamp for 3 weeks. He ordered special parts. He cleaned every piece of brass. He replaced all the wiring. He polished the glass until it sparkled. Finally, one evening, he called Sarah up to the lamp room. He said it was ready. He asked if she wanted to turn it on. Sarah's hand shook as she reached for the switch. This was the moment. The lamp had been dark for so long. What if it did not work? What if all their effort was for nothing? She took a deep breath and flipped the switch. Nothing happened at first. Then there was a humming sound. The lamp began to turn slowly. And then light. Bright, beautiful light flooding out across the ocean. Sarah started to cry. The lighthouse was alive again. Mr. Chen smiled. He said it was the most beautiful thing he had seen in years. He said her grandmother would be proud. Sarah thanked him over and over. She paid him and he left. But Sarah stayed in the lamp room for hours. She watched the light sweep across the dark water. She imagined all the ships that would see it. All the sailors who would know they were safe. She felt her grandmother beside her. She felt Thomas too. They were all here together in the light. Word spread about the lighthouse. People in town heard it was working again. They came to see it. Some were old people who remembered it from their childhood. They told Sarah stories about seeing the light from their windows, about feeling safe because they knew it was there, about her grandmother who had kept it running for so many years. Sarah wrote down their stories. She wanted to remember everything. A reporter from the local newspaper came. She wanted to write a story about Sarah and the lighthouse. Sarah was nervous, but she agreed. The reporter asked why she did this, why she spent so much money, why she gave up her city life. Sarah tried to explain about love and family and legacy, about how some things are worth saving even if they do not make sense on paper. The reporter understood. She wrote a beautiful article. After the article came out, more people visited, families with children, artists who wanted to paint the lighthouse, photographers who wanted to take pictures. Sarah did not mind. She liked having visitors. She liked sharing her grandmother's story. She started giving tours on weekends. She would tell people about Thomas and her grandmother, about their love story, about the ships they saved, about the life they built together. One Saturday, a young woman came to visit. Her name was Emma. She was about Sarah's age. She said her great-grandfather had been Captain Anderson, the man who helped Sarah's grandmother buy the lighthouse. Emma had found his old journals. In them, he wrote about the lighthouse and the brave woman who kept it running. He wrote about how she had saved his life when he was young, how he never forgot her kindness. Sarah and Emma became friends. Emma lived in town and worked as a teacher. She loved history and old stories. She visited the lighthouse often. She helped Sarah organize her grandmother's diaries. They talked about making them into a book about love and lighthouses and the choices women make. They thought other people might want to read it. Sarah also met a man named David. He was a marine biologist. He came to the lighthouse to study the tide pools on the rocks below. He was quiet and kind. He had gentle eyes. He loved the ocean as much as Sarah was learning to love it. They started having coffee together, then dinner, then long walks on the beach. Sarah felt something growing between them, something that felt like the beginning of love. David asked Sarah if she ever got lonely in the lighthouse. Sarah thought about it. She said no, not really. She had visitors. She had Emma as a friend. She had her grandmother's diaries to read. She had the ocean to watch. She had work to do maintaining the lighthouse. And now she had David. Her life felt full in a way it never had in the city. But Sarah also understood what David was really asking. Was she going to stay? Was this temporary or permanent? Was there room in her life for someone else? Sarah did not know how to answer. She liked David very much, but she also liked her independence. She liked being alone with her thoughts. She liked making her own choices without having to consider anyone else, just like her grandmother had. One evening, David brought Sarah a gift. It was a small painting. He had painted the lighthouse at sunset. The light was glowing. The sky was orange and pink. The ocean was calm. It was beautiful. Sarah hung it in her bedroom. Every morning when she woke up, she saw it. It reminded her that she was not really alone. People cared about her. People saw the beauty in what she was doing. Sarah decided to start a small business. She would run the lighthouse as a museum and event space. People could rent it for weddings and parties. She would give history tours. She would sell books and postcards in a little gift shop. It would not make her rich, but it would pay the bills. It would keep the lighthouse running. It would give her purpose and income. It felt right. The first wedding at the lighthouse was in June, a young couple from town. They got married in the lamp room at sunset. The light was on. It swept across the ocean as they said their vows. Sarah stood in the corner and watched. She thought about her grandmother marrying Thomas all those years ago. She thought about love and courage and following your heart. She cried happy tears. After that, more couples wanted to get married at the lighthouse. Sarah was booked every weekend through the summer. She hired Emma to help her. They cleaned and decorated. They welcomed guests. They told the story of the lighthouse. People loved it. They said it was the most romantic place they had ever seen. They said they could feel the love in the walls. Sarah knew what they meant. David asked Sarah to marry him on a cold December night. They were in the lamp room watching a storm. The wind was howling. The waves were huge. The light kept turning steady and sure. David got down on one knee. He said he loved her. He said he wanted to spend his life with her. He said he understood the lighthouse was part of her. He would never ask her to leave it. He wanted to stay with her, to help her, to build a life together here. Sarah said yes. She loved David too, but she also knew what she was doing. She was making the same choice her grandmother made. She was choosing love. She was choosing a simple life over a complicated one. She was choosing the lighthouse. She hoped it would turn out better for her than it had for her grandmother. She hoped she and David would have many years together. But even if they did not, she knew this was right. This was where she belonged. They got married in the spring. In the lamp room, of course. Emma was her bridesmaid. Mr. Chen came. Her mother came in a wheelchair. Many people from town came. They all climbed the stairs together. It was crowded, but nobody minded. The ceremony was simple. They wrote their own vows. They promised to love each other, to take care of the lighthouse, to honor the memory of those who came before them, to keep the light burning. After the wedding, Sarah and David made the lighthouse their home. David moved in his books and his microscope. He set up a small lab on the first floor to study his specimens. Sarah kept her grandmother's diaries on a special shelf. She read from them sometimes. She felt like her grandmother was still teaching her, still guiding her, still showing her what love really means. Years passed. Sarah and David were happy. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl. The children grew up in the lighthouse just like Margaret had. They learned to climb the stairs. They collected shells on the beach. They helped their parents run the museum. They learned their great-great-grandmother's story. They felt proud of their family, proud of the lighthouse, proud of the love that built it all. Sarah grew old in the lighthouse. Her hair turned gray. Her hands got wrinkled. But she never stopped climbing the stairs. She never stopped turning on the light every evening. She never stopped telling the story of her grandmother and Thomas, the story of love and sacrifice, the story of a lighthouse that refused to die. And when Sarah's time came many years later, she died the same way her grandmother had, peacefully in her sleep, in the lighthouse she loved, right where she wanted to be. The light kept burning. It always would. Because love like that never ends. It just gets passed down, from one generation to the next. Forever and always, like the light itself, steady, sure, eternal.